What is up, guys? NYKia31 here, and with this video I'm going to begin my previewing of the NFL and upcoming college football seasons. We're on week 2 of the preseason now, and before we know it, it'll be opening weekend, and college football, same thing. So here we go, and I'm using a online ranked game of Madden 15, one of the last ones, as the backdrop here. Rolling with Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers and the Philly playbook on offense, cover 2 on D. And Cam's a problem in this bad boy. And the Panthers front 7, oof, they can do some stuff. And this guy was pretty good, actually. He was a pretty good opponent with a bit of a brain on his head, which is rare in your online random games. But you'll see him do the things that online randoms do to paraphrase Lob Mob's wonderful NBA 2K series, things randoms do. He'll go random, and you'll see how that plays out for him at the end. So, anyhow, quarterbacks. Arguably the most demanding position in all of professional sports, the hardest position to fill and to find quality players. Much like starting pitchers in baseball, it's hard to find a abundance of quality starting pitchers. Quarterback, same thing. You have 32 teams. You have 32 starting quarterback jobs, but you don't have 32 guys that are capable of performing the job at a professional level, really. Not to the level that you would want in order to win games. And often, as your quarterback goes, your team goes. You have your anomalies here and there where a dominant defense or a combination of dominant defense, dominant O-line, dominant running game can mask your quarterback, and you can win big with a game manager. Your Trent Dilfers of the world, your Brad Johnsons to an extent, your Neil O'Donnells can get you to a Super Bowl if they're surrounded by really strong pieces. Guys like Jim McMahon, who was more physically talented than given credit for, but he was hardly the '85 Bears' meal ticket. A guy like Phil Simms, who again, better than I think he was given credit for. If you put Phil Simms, say, in a Bill Walsh West Coast offense, if you put him on Dan Marino's Dolphin teams, if you put Phil Simms in the K-gun, really, he'd put up good passing numbers. He was talented, but, the Giants of his era were built around their linebackers, offensive line, run the rock. As a result, the perception of him doesn't quite stack up to the guys of his generation. And everyone wants that franchise quarterback, that guy that they can plug in and not worry about the position for the next 10 to 15 years. And if you're a Jets fan like myself, and you're in that 28 to 40-year-old age range, you've never seen a franchise quarterback as a Jets fan. And as you guys know, I'm rather bitter about that. And guys are so thirsty, or teams are so thirsty for that type of guy, that more mistakes are made when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks, scouting quarterbacks, than any other position. The laundry list of busts at the QB position is a long and glorious one. Kelly Stauffer, Jeff George, Achilles Smith, Joey Harrington, Browning Nagel, Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, Tim Couch, David Carr, and on and on and on. You can just rattle them off. But when we take a step back and look at it, how many true franchise quarterbacks are really out there? One of the things that makes quarterbacking or evaluating quarterbacks so hard is that so much of it can be subjective and irrational. You can fall in love with a guy despite what your eyeballs and your better senses tell you. Like, for example, I love Peyton Manning. I'm a complete Peyton Manning fanboy. I know he's not better than Tom Brady, but I don't care. I love guys like Matty Ice, and Joe Flacco, who can really spin it. I know they're not, you know, elite of the elite, but I don't care. There's just something about them that draws me to them and makes me a fan of them for life. I'm like that with Phillip Rivers too. I think Phillip Rivers is as good as anybody. He just hasn't won in the postseason, and most of it has not been his fault. I also like Cam Newton. I like Cam Newton a lot. Thought he had a lot of intangibles when he was in college. Big physical guy, can spin it as well, athletic. Not your classic drop back guy in terms of accuracy. He reminds me a little bit of Donovan McNabb as a thrower, really. Um, Another guy who wasn't the most accurate guy in the world at times. But he's a unique guy. He's fast, he's physical, he can take a pounding, and he can, throw the ball well enough. And me liking Cam Newton is incredibly irrational because I tend not to like running quarterbacks. But when you're talking about true franchise guys who can carry your entire organization, you're talking about a very small list. And it goes like this as far as my view of what a franchise quarterback should be. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, and I'm going to put Russell Wilson in that category, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But as far as those guys, those are quarterbacks that can get it done week in, week out, carry your team. Head coach does not matter. Offensive coordinator doesn't matter. The opponent doesn't matter. To a certain degree, personnel doesn't matter. I'll use Andrew Luck as an example. That Colts team last year sucked. They couldn't block anybody. They couldn't stop anybody. And if they didn't run into a Peyton Manning that was broken down and was forced into making just all arm throws, they'd probably lose that game. He was that team. He made that team go. Aaron Rodgers is a guy who can beat you any which way. He can beat you in the pocket. He can beat you out of the pocket. He can beat you on improv. He can beat you with his mind. He can manipulate coverage. Does not have a single weakness in his game. Tom Brady, he can beat you with Troy Brown and Deion Branch. He can beat you with Randy Moss and Wes Welker. He can beat you with a bunch of 5'8" possession receivers and tight ends. It doesn't matter. Ben, same thing. If he needs to beat you throwing for 600 yards, he can do it. Drew Brees can compensate for a lack of height with great feet, great mind, great pre-snap recognition, pinpoint accuracy. No holes in his game despite his lack of height. Now let me get to Russell Wilson. I've seen enough of Russell Wilson where I'm convinced that if you took him out of Seattle's offense, which has some pretty ordinary receivers, and in my opinion, one of the worst OCs in the sport, I see Russell bail that team out of just absurd plays enough to convince me that if you put Russell Wilson in Green Bay's offense, he could run it. Not a doubt on my mind. But, the way Seattle runs their offense, you're never going to have the numbers that an Aaron Rodgers would have, that a Luck would have. Even a Ben Roethlisberger, who, has Le'Veon Bell to work with. Seattle's offense just isn't structured that way. And it shows because he has to bail them out with some, fly at the seat of your pants stuff from time to time. I don't think that's on him. I think that's more on the way the offense is structured. And it leads to him, having some ugly games like he had against the Packers. But I think if you gave Russell a little bit more to work with, and I think Jimmy Graham's going to work wonders for him, I think that's going to reduce the amount of times that Russell has to scramble around like a little rodent out there and pull a rabbit out of his hat. Graham, I think, is going to be a really, really big help. So you have those guys, and the rest of the league, has to make do with guys who are very good but not quite at that level in game managers. And if they don't have, or they're hoping to survive the crap quarterback that they have, and hang around long enough to draft a guy who can develop into that franchise guy or that slightly below franchise level guy who's very good and who you can win with as well. Now, what do I mean by the level below the franchise guy who's still good enough to win with? This is where you get subjective. Like, take Eli Manning, for example. Would any Giants fan be disappointed with the career Eli Manning has given them? No. He's gotten you 2 Super Bowls. And I think in some ways, Eli has advantages over his brother. I think Peyton Manning is a little bit of a QB cyborg. If you were going to program a machine to play quarterback, you'd program it to play like Peyton Manning. You plug in the game plan and he will spit it out back to you to perfection. You know that you have no chance against Peyton within the first 5 minutes of the game when he's out there conducting, moving guys around, calling out where your pressure's coming from, calling out the coverage, changing protections, and is just getting rid of the ball in 0.5 seconds on a dart. You get that, you're losing every single time because you're never breaking that rhythm. Where Peyton breaks down is when things get chaotic. Things unravel, they unravel quickly, and games tend to snowball on him. The Super Bowl is a perfect example. Once you throw disorder, like a botched snap that goes over his head and results in a safety, you start seeing the happy feet and you start seeing his mental clock accelerate in a bad way. He's making decisions too fast, and you get the turnovers. It only happens to him maybe twice a season, but it's his one glaring weakness. Eli, on the other hand, can function better when things get chaotic, but is less accurate and consistent on a down-to-down basis. Tony Romo is a polarizing guy. In my opinion, Tony Romo needs the type of team that Dallas was last year. When you ask Tony Romo to carry too much of the load, you get the Tony Romo that we've had in big games the previous few years. If you protect Tony Romo, you give him a good running game, take calculated shots with Dez or to Dez and to Witten, he can do some very good things. The man can play, but when you have him carry the load, you get the mistakes. Matty Ice, I love the guy. He always puts up great stats, but he's just that. He's a stats QB, and he falls apart whenever there's a big game to be played. Matty Ice has never showed up in a big game, the NFL level, in his life. So you have those guys who are talented, but there's some type of fatal flaw that holds them back from being that top-tier franchise guy. You have your game managers, your Andy Daltons and your Alex Smiths of the world. These are the guys that can, win you a division title. They can get you to 9-7, 10-6, 11-5. In a good year, if everything falls right, you can win, 12, 13 games with them. But they need great coaching. They need great talent around them. These are the kind of guys that have to, execute the game plan. Everything has to fall into place. If the game gets out of control and the game plan has to be thrown out the window and you have to go to plan B, which is them winning the game for you, ain't gonna happen. And I think that's what most of the league is. Once you get past those top 8 to 10 guys, you got a whole lot of schlock that you have to manage your team around. They're either young guys who are still trying to find themselves, like Ryan Tannehill. I think this is the year for Ryan Tannehill. He's shown some very good things. He had a pretty good year last year. Looking forward to seeing what he can do. But you can't really make a judgment on what Teddy Bridgewater and Derek Carr are going to be. They're showing good signs. Their early returns look good, but they're still finding their way. So you have that. You have guys who just flat out aren't very good. These are your Brian Hoyers, your Geno Smiths, your Ryan Fitzpatricks, your Zach Mettenbergers, your Charlie Whitehursts, guys like that. You're just praying that you can get them out the door before they get you fired and get somebody else there. And then you have your enigmas. The enigmas are the ones that get you fired. These are your coach killers like Jay Cutler, who no one can figure out. I'll throw RG3 in that category too. Let me get to Cutler for just 1 second. Cutler is the new age Jeff George. I bet you Jay Cutler looks phenomenal in practice. I bet you he is one of the best looking guys in the league at a 7-on-7 drill. I mean, arm talent, he's got that in spades. He's athletic. He ran a spread offense in college. He's got all the physical goods, but he has zilch, no intangibles whatsoever. And OC after OC has been thrown under the bus as he just continues to stink up the entire league. That's your classic enigma coach-killing quarterback. RG3, same way. You know, he's broken down. His confidence is shot. He's just a mess, and he's got no offensive line. He just looks like a guy who just needs a fresh start somewhere else. Matthew Stafford, I put him in the enigma category. A guy with big-time talent, first overall pick in the draft, and he's put up big-time numbers, but there's just something missing there. Something missing that no one can quite figure out. But he's just so gifted. You just hope the light bulb goes on and he puts it all together, because when he does, or if he does, my gosh, you got a complete monster on your hands. And I suppose Matty Ice is kind of like that too. Matty Ice is a great fantasy football quarterback. As I said before, he always puts up stats, but stink bombs in every big game. Just doesn't show up, and you can't figure out why. Colin Kaepernick, another guy who I put in the enigma category. And he's the textbook case as to why I don't like running quarterbacks generally. Because quarterbacks that need their legs in order to function, the league always figures that guy out. The NFL will take away your legs one way or the other. Either through scheme, either through injury, or through age. Which is what happened to Vic. Vic lost a step or two, and he never developed as a polished passer, and he doesn't have anything else to fall back on, and he's now looking for a job. You can win games like that under the right circumstances. Heck, Vic played in an NFC championship game, but they always hit a wall. And unless they break through that wall by developing their craft in the pocket, their upside will always be limited. Steve Young made that breakthrough. Randall Cunningham, in a different way, made that breakthrough as well. He was away from the game for a while, came back as an older player, didn't have the legs. Having Randy Moss and Chris Carter helped, but he still had the arm strength and the throwing ability to make plays in the pocket. I'll put Sam Bradford in the enigma category only because we've barely seen him the past 3 years. It's been so long since we've seen Sam Bradford play for an extended period of time that we forget that the last he played, he was playing damn well. He was playing as good as anybody. And I think Chip Kelly knew that he had in Foles a guy who he could sell high. And if Bradford can keep his ACLs in one piece, I think he's going to be a better player than Foles by a lot. I think Foles is going to be exposed a little bit. I think you saw him get exposed some last year before he got hurt. I think Chip Kelly is right on that move. I think he got the best out of Nick Foles already. But whether Bradford can stay in one piece remains to be seen. If he can, he's a better player, not a doubt about it. The rookies, I've said before, I've said several times, I don't like either one of them. Mariota, to me, I see Colin Kaepernick. I don't like Colin Kaepernick. Doesn't make much sense for me to have much confidence in Mariota. Winston, I saw a lot of bad decisions by him last year. Staring down receivers, bailing out and throwing off his back foot under pressure. Turnovers in droves. Once the talent level began to be dialed back a little bit, and he no longer had Benjamin plus Green plus Nick O'Leary, to throw to, he had problems. He's got the throwing talent, he's got the tools, but that decision making is pretty scary. That Louisville game, he could have thrown 6 INTs in that sucker. The Notre Dame game, throwing fadeaways up for grabs. There's a lot to prove for both those guys. Both those guys have a ways to go, I think. And I think there's an excellent chance that both of them crap out. So that is what I think in regards to the quarterbacks around the league in part 1 of this little NFL preview series, or I guess, football preview series. I'll be talking about college as well. And that is also it for this game, which I win thanks to a going random and going for the 2-point conversion and the W and coming up short. So hope you guys enjoyed. Love to hear your guys' thoughts. Talk to you all later. Peace.